There comes a time in life when we must stop and ask ourselves, who are we? Where do we come from? And what is the deeper purpose behind our struggles, our resilience, and our faith? Many of us have felt, deep in our souls, an undeniable connection to something greater, a force that guides us, strengthens us, and calls us toward a higher purpose. That force is Jesus. But have you ever wondered why Black people throughout history have maintained such a strong and unshakable connection to him? This is not by coincidence. It is not by chance. It is a divine truth woven into our very existence. Today, I am here to reveal 3 undeniable signs that prove why Black people are not just followers of Jesus. We are deeply connected to his spirit, his journey, and his purpose in ways that go beyond what the world sees on the surface. And when you fully understand this, it will change how you see yourself, your faith, and your place in the world. Sign 1, our struggles mirror his journey. There comes a time in every person's life when they must pause and reflect on the struggles they have endured. Pain, suffering, and trials are not foreign to any of us, but there is something unique about the experiences that Black people have faced throughout history. These struggles are not just random events, nor are they meaningless. They hold a deeper spiritual significance, one that connects us to something greater than ourselves. When we look at the life of Jesus, we see a journey marked by suffering, rejection, betrayal, and ultimately triumph. His story is not one of ease or comfort. Rather, it is one of sacrifice, endurance, and resilience. From the moment he entered the world, he was met with opposition. His family had to flee for his safety as King Herod sought to destroy him. He grew up knowing what it meant to be an outcast, to be questioned, to be doubted. And as his mission unfolded, the challenges only grew greater. The same can be said for Black people throughout history. From the moment we were taken from our lands, forced into chains, and subjected to the horrors of slavery, we have known suffering. Yet, like Jesus, our suffering has never been the end of the story. We have been beaten down, but we have never been broken. We have been oppressed, but we have never been silenced. We have carried burdens so heavy that others would have crumbled under their weight, yet we continue to stand. Jesus was persecuted for who he was. His very existence was a threat to those in power. His message of love, justice, and truth was so revolutionary that the leaders of his time saw him as dangerous. He did not fit into the mold that society wanted him to fit into. He was not willing to conform to the expectations of religious leaders who had become more concerned with power than with the will of God. Instead, he stood firm in his identity and his mission, even when it cost him everything. Black people have walked a similar path. From the beginning, we have been seen as a threat. Our strength, our resilience, our unity, and our faith have challenged systems of oppression. Slavery was not just about labor, it was about control. It was about breaking the spirit of a people so that they would never rise, never fight back, never believe that they were meant for more. But like Jesus, we could not be broken. During the Civil Rights Movement, leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, and countless others took a stand against injustice. They faced imprisonment, violence, and even death, but they refused to be silent. They were beaten, spit on, humiliated, and in many cases murdered for standing up for truth and justice. Yet their sacrifice was not in vain. They too mirrored the journey of Jesus, who walked toward his purpose despite knowing the suffering that awaited him. Jesus knew what it meant to be falsely accused. The very people he came to save turned against him. They called him a blasphemer, a liar, a fraud. They spread false rumors about him, twisting his words and intentions to fit their own agenda. Even his own disciples doubted him at times. He was betrayed by someone he trusted, sold out for a mere 30 pieces of silver. He stood before a crowd that once welcomed him with open arms, only to hear them shout, "Crucify him." How many times have Black people been falsely accused, misrepresented, or betrayed? How many times have we been painted as criminals, as dangerous, as unworthy? The justice system has never been just for us. The very institutions that were meant to protect and serve have often been the same ones that have persecuted and oppressed us. Our ancestors were lynched in broad daylight while crowds cheered. Families were torn apart, lives were destroyed, and yet, like Jesus, we endured. When Jesus was arrested and taken to trial, he was given no real chance at justice. The decision to crucify him was made long before he stood before Pilate. It was a predetermined outcome, a setup. The trial was a mere formality to justify what the leaders had already decided. They were afraid of him, afraid of the truth he carried, afraid of the change he represented. How often has the black experience mirrored this same injustice? How many times have we seen our people sentenced before they even stepped foot in a courtroom? How many times have the odds been stacked against us, the verdict decided before the trial even began? The story of Jesus is not just a story of one man's suffering. It is the story of every black person who has ever been told they are less than, who has ever been denied justice, who has ever been condemned without cause. But just as Jesus did not stay in the grave, black people have never stayed in the place where our oppressors tried to keep us. They thought that by crucifying him, they would silence him forever. They thought that by sealing his tomb, they would put an end to his movement. But on the third day, he rose again. This is our story as well. No matter how many times we have been pushed down, we have always risen. From slavery to freedom, from segregation to civil rights, from oppression to empowerment, we have risen. And we will continue to rise. Because just like Jesus, we were never meant to stay down. When Jesus rose, he did not come back in weakness. He came back in power. He walked out of that tomb victorious, proving that nothing, not even death, could hold him down. And that same power lives in us. The resilience, the strength, the unbreakable spirit that runs through our veins is not of this world. It is divine. It is the mark of a people who have been chosen, called, and set apart for something greater. This is why, despite everything we have been through, we continue to move forward. It is why we continue to create, to innovate, to lead, to inspire. We are not just survivors. We are warriors. We are not just victims of history. We are the ones who rewrite it. We are the ones who take the pain of the past and turn it into fuel for the future. So when you look at your struggles, when you think about the pain you have endured, remember this: you are walking the same path that Jesus walked. Your suffering is not in vain. Your resilience is proof that you are connected to something greater. Your ability to rise again and again is the very essence of who Jesus is. The world may try to keep you down, but just like Jesus, you are destined to rise. There is power in your story, there is purpose in your pain, and there is victory waiting for you on the other side of every trial. So stand tall, walk boldly, and never forget that you are not just following Jesus. You are reflecting his strength, his endurance, and his unshakable faith. Sign 2. Our spirit is unshakable. There is something powerful about the human spirit when it refuses to break. No matter how much pressure is placed upon it, no matter how many burdens are forced onto its back, there is a strength that refuses to be extinguished. That strength is more than just human resilience. It is something divine. It is the kind of power that cannot be explained by logic alone, a force that exists beyond what the eyes can see. It is faith. It is the spirit of endurance, the ability to withstand storms, trials, and tribulations without losing the essence of who you are. Black people have embodied this unshakable spirit for centuries. No matter what has come against us, no matter how many times history has tried to erase us, we are still here. That is not by accident. It is not by mere coincidence. It is a reflection of something greater, something eternal, something that connects us to the very essence of Jesus himself. To understand this truth is to recognize that our endurance is not just about survival. It is about purpose. It is about carrying forward a divine strength that has been passed down from generation to generation, a strength that mirrors the very nature of Christ. When we look at the life of Jesus, we see a man who faced unimaginable opposition. From the moment he began his ministry, he was tested, ridiculed, and rejected. The people who should have embraced him, religious leaders, scholars, those who claimed to be close to God, were the very ones who opposed him the most. They did not want him to succeed because his presence alone was a challenge to their authority. His truth threatened their power. His love exposed their hypocrisy. And so they did everything in their power to stop him. But no matter how much they plotted against him, they could not shake his spirit. They called him a liar, yet he continued to speak the truth. They tried to trap him with words, yet he answered with wisdom. They attempted to make him doubt his identity, yet he stood firm in who he was. Even when his closest disciples abandoned him, even when he stood alone, facing persecution, he did not waver. There was a fire inside of him that no man could put out, a power that could not be broken, no matter how much suffering he endured. This is the same fire that has burned within black people for generations. There were those who believed that slavery would break us, that taking away our freedom, our names, our languages, and our families would strip us of our identity. Yet even in chains, we sang. Even in the fields, we found ways to worship. Even when we were told we were nothing, we held on to the truth that we were created for more. We were never meant to remain in bondage, and deep within our souls, we knew it. That knowing, that deep-rooted faith, is what carried us forward. There is something miraculous about a people who continue to believe, even when the world gives them every reason to lose hope. This is the story of black people. This is the story of Jesus. No matter how much was taken from him, he remained whole. No matter how many people turned against him, he remained faithful. No matter how dark things became, he never lost sight of the light. Throughout history, black people have embodied this same kind of faith. Even in the midst of oppression, we created, we built, we dreamed. We refused to be defined by the limitations that others placed upon us. There is something sacred about a people who refuse to be broken, something divine about a people who continue to rise despite every force that tries to push them down. This is the spirit of Jesus, the spirit of unshakable faith that cannot be silenced, that cannot be destroyed. Think about how many times black people have been told that they cannot succeed, that they cannot lead, that they cannot rise above the barriers placed in front of them. And yet, time and time again, we prove them wrong. Every invention, every breakthrough, every act of brilliance is a testament to the fact that we are more than what history has tried to make us. We are more than what society has tried to label us. We are more than what oppression has tried to reduce us to. And just like Jesus, no amount of rejection, no amount of suffering, no amount of hate can change the truth of who we are. Even in the darkest times, we have held on to faith. When our ancestors were denied the right to read and write, they still found ways to learn. When they were denied access to churches, they built their own. When they were denied a seat at the table, they created their own spaces. There is something unstoppable about a people who refuse to give up. That refusal is not just an act of defiance, it is a reflection of the Spirit of God. Jesus did not come into the world with wealth or status. He did not seek power in the way that the world defines it. He was born in a humble setting, raised among the people, and walked with those who were considered outcasts. He was not afraid to challenge the system, to speak against injustice, to stand for truth, even when it made him a target. He did not conform to what society expected of him, and because of that, they sought to silence him. But even in death, he could not be stopped. That is the spirit that lives within us. That is the reason why, no matter how many times history has tried to bury us, we have never stayed down. We have always found a way to rise, to rebuild, to reclaim what was meant for us. There is something inside of us that refuses to stay in the darkness, something that pushes us forward even when the odds are against us. That something is faith. That something is divine. When Jesus was on the cross, the world thought that was the end of his story. They believed that they had finally won, that they had silenced him for good. But 3 days later, he proved them wrong. His resurrection was not just about his own victory. It was about showing the world that nothing can stop the power of God. It was about proving that no matter how impossible things seem, there is always a greater plan at work. Black people have been resurrected time and time again. Every time we are counted out, every time we are written off, every time we are told that we have reached our limit, we find a way to prove otherwise. That is the power of God moving through us. That is the same unstoppable force that raised Jesus from the grave. That is the same divine energy that has carried us through generations of struggle and led us into new victories. If there is one thing that history has shown us, it is that nothing can destroy a people who are connected to a higher purpose. The trials we have faced were never meant to break us. They were meant to refine us, to strengthen us, to prepare us for something greater. Our journey has not been easy, but neither was the journey of Jesus. And just like him, we were never meant to stay in a place of suffering. No matter what comes against us, our spirit remains unshakable. No matter how many times we are told we cannot succeed, we continue to rise. No matter how dark things may seem, we hold on to the light. Because just like Jesus, we know that the story is not over. We know that we are destined for greater things. We know that no force on earth can stop what God has placed within us. That is why we keep moving forward. That is why we keep building, keep creating, keep dreaming, because we are not just survivors, we are overcomers. We are not just followers of Jesus, we are reflections of his power, his endurance, and his unbreakable faith. No matter what happens, we will always stand strong, because our spirit is unshakable. Sign 3. Our praise moves mountains. There is something undeniable about the power of praise. It is more than just words, more than just a song, more than just an outward expression of gratitude. True praise comes from a place deep within the soul, a place where faith and hope reside even in the face of trials. Praise is not just an act. It is a weapon, a force that moves mountains, breaks chains, and opens doors that once seemed sealed shut. It is the ultimate declaration that no matter what the circumstances may be, there is a power greater than our struggles, a power that reigns above all things. Black people have always understood the power of praise. It has been woven into the very fabric of our existence, passed down from generation to generation, sustaining us in the most difficult of times. From the fields where enslaved people lifted their voices in spirituals, to the churches where generations have gathered to clap, shout, and sing, praise has been our refuge, our strength, and our declaration of victory. Even when everything around us said we should be broken, we lifted our hands. Even when the world tried to silence us, our voices only grew louder. This is no coincidence. It is a reflection of something greater, something divine. It is a sign that we are connected to Jesus, who himself demonstrated the power of praise. Even in his most trying moments, he never stopped acknowledging the presence of his Father. He never let his circumstances dictate his faith. When he was tempted in the wilderness, he did not waver. When he was surrounded by doubt and opposition, he continued to move forward. And when he faced death itself, he lifted up his spirit in surrender, knowing that even the grave could not hold him. Jesus understood what many of us have come to learn. Praise is not about what we see, but about what we believe. It is easy to celebrate when things are good, when the blessings are flowing, when the path is clear. But real praise, the kind that moves mountains, happens when there is no evidence of a way out, when the storm is raging, when the night feels endless. It is in those moments that praise becomes the most powerful, because it is no longer based on what we see, but on who we know God to be. Black people have lived this truth for centuries. When our ancestors were in chains, they sang songs of freedom. Those songs were not just melodies, they were declarations of faith. They were reminders that even though the world saw them as slaves, they were children of God. Even though they were bound on earth, their souls were free. Those songs became anthems of resistance, prayers wrapped in melody, carrying hope across the fields and into the heavens. They sang because they knew that their suffering was not the end of their story. They praised because they believed in a God who had delivered before and would deliver again. The Bible is filled with stories of people who praised their way through adversity. One of the most powerful examples is Paul and Silas, who were beaten and thrown into prison for preaching the gospel. They had every reason to be discouraged, every reason to feel abandoned, yet instead of giving in to despair, they began to pray and sing hymns. In that moment, their praise shook the very foundations of the prison. Chains were broken, doors were opened, and freedom was made possible. Their praise was not just a response to victory, it was the very thing that brought it about. This is the same power that Black people have carried throughout history. The civil rights movement was filled with praise. In the midst of brutality, oppression, and injustice, our people continued to lift their voices, not just in protests, but in worship. Songs like "We Shall Overcome" were not just hopeful lyrics, they were declarations of faith, reminders that no matter how dark the night, morning was coming. Those songs gave people the strength to march, to stand, to endure. They moved mountains in ways that weapons and violence never could. There is something about praise that confuses the enemy. It is expected that when people face hardship, they will break down, give up, and lose hope. But when praise rises instead, it disrupts everything. It is a sign that no matter how much pressure is applied, the spirit cannot be crushed. It is a declaration that victory is not determined by present circumstances, but by divine promise. When Black people have faced oppression, injustice, and suffering, our response has not been silence, it has been praise. And that praise has moved mountains, broken barriers, and changed history. Jesus praised even in the midst of suffering. On the cross, in his final moments, he cried out to God, not in despair, but in acknowledgement of his presence. He knew that his suffering was temporary, that even in death, victory was on the horizon. This is the same kind of faith that has carried us through generations. When our backs were against the wall, we praised. When doors were shut in our faces, we praised. When the world told us we would never rise, we praised. And every time mountains moved. The power of praise is not just about songs or words. It is about faith in action. It is about choosing to believe in the promise even when the reality looks impossible. It is about standing firm in the truth that God is greater than any obstacle, stronger than any enemy, and more powerful than any force that comes against us. Praise is what connects us to that truth. It is what keeps us grounded when the world tries to shake us. It is what reminds us that no matter what happens, we are never alone. There is a reason why the Black church has always been filled with music, with shouting, with hands lifted in surrender. It is because we understand that praise is not just a Sunday ritual. It is a lifeline. It is what carried our ancestors through slavery, what sustained them through segregation, what strengthened them through every battle they faced. It is what continues to empower us today. When we lift our voices, we are not just making noise. We are calling upon a power that is greater than anything in this world. Jesus moved mountains, not by force, but by faith. He showed us that true power does not come from weapons, money, or status, but from a heart that remains steadfast in the presence of God. That same power is within us. Every time we praise, we activate it. Every time we sing, we declare it. Every time we choose to lift our hands instead of bowing our heads in defeat, we walk in it. There is a reason why our praise is so strong. It is because we have been through the fire and have come out refined. It is because we have seen what God can do. It is because we know that no matter what happens, He is still in control. Our praise is not just a response to victory, it is the reason for it. It is what keeps us moving forward when the world tries to hold us back. It is what keeps us standing when everything else tries to push us down. So no matter what comes, we will continue to praise. No matter what battles we face, we will continue to sing. No matter how high the mountains, we will continue to declare that they will move, because we have seen it happen before and we know it will happen again. Our praise is our power. It is our strength. It is our testimony that no matter what the world says, we are victorious. Just like Jesus, we do not praise because of what we see, we praise because of what we know. And that knowledge, that faith, is what will continue to move mountains, break chains, and change the world. If this message spoke to your soul, let it be more than just words. Let it be a reminder of who you truly are. You are walking in divine purpose. You are not forgotten, you are not defeated, and you are not alone. Every challenge you've faced, every battle you've fought, every tear you've shed has been shaping you for something greater. There is power in your journey, power in your story, and power in your faith. Just like Jesus, you have endured hardships, faced opposition, and carried burdens that seemed unbearable. But through it all, you are still standing. That is no accident. That is the evidence of God's hand on your life. You were created to overcome, to inspire, and to rise above every obstacle placed in your path. You are not meant to stay in struggle. You are destined for victory. The world may try to tell you otherwise, but never forget that your identity is rooted in something eternal. So keep rising, keep believing, and keep pushing forward. Don't allow fear, doubt, or circumstances to define you. Your faith has the power to move mountains. Your voice has the power to uplift. And your life has the power to inspire others. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Let's continue to uplift, empower, and walk in our divine calling together.